We don't talk about Bruno, no. We don't talk about Bruno. But, yo, what's up, boys and girls? It's your boy Swolelax here, and I'm back at it again with another video. This time, something just a little bit different. Today, let's talk about the Yu-Gi-Oh! Ban list. So the upcoming Yu-Gi-Oh! Ban list soon approacheth, and what do we have here but another person throwing their 2 cents into the ring. Some of these thoughts and opinions inside of this video are going to be pretty cold takes, but overall I do think there are some things that I wanted to talk about and address. And while normally ban list and ban list discussions talk about predictions and what's going to be on the next one, what cards are being taken off the ban list, Mally to 3, screamed the hero player. Everyone and their mother has an opinion on what cards need to be banned or limited inside of the current format of Yu-Gi-Oh! So let's talk about a few of those cards today. And while I'm no multi-million-dollar corporation that has an R&D team that is currently testing and going over research and data and figuring out what cards could or could not be taken off, I'm just your disappointed dad with opinions on what cards I think need to get got. A quick side note too, do you guys think Pot of Greed could come back to 1? I have someone that thinks that it can. I just want to get your opinions on that. Okay, so Imperial Order, Vertanaconda, Scythe, and Dagda are all pretty much on the chopping block right away. There's a few other cards that people think need to be hit, limited, or banned, but for the most part, these are the big heavy hitters that everyone says needs to go because they essentially say you can't play the game in one way or another. Now, the interesting part about all of these cards and other cards that people speculate might get hit or should get hit is that they tend to be cards that Konami overlooks for the most part. The dream ideal scenario for a development team of any game particularly is game balance, finding that perfect mix of player interactivity that makes the game fun and interesting. And something as dynamic and as expansive as Yu-Gi-Oh! With over 10,000 cards that could potentially be good at any given moment, there's a lot to consider when it comes to game balance. But particularly, Konami likes to keep cards and take cards away that restrict player interaction. Call by the Grave and Red Reboot are 2 interesting examples that are currently limited on the ban list. These 2 cards limit player interactivity with very little to no answers to them specifically. And while over time and with some preparation, these cards do have interactions of some sort, it disproportionately affects the game in a way that I think that Konami thinks is unhealthy or that they don't want to see inside the game. Now, this can change depending on the meta, and this can change on a lot of different factors. So what the point I'm trying to get at here is Konami hates cards that just say, you win, congratulations, you drew better than me. Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I just drew Imperial Order. Thanks. Imperial Order is a card that should have been gone a long time ago. People arguing that this card needs to be in the game, I don't think they know what they're talking about. Quite frankly, this card is one of the most broken, unfair cards inside of the entire game. And while yes, technically there are answers to this card, just use monster effects, lol. When this card is generally in use, there are safeguards around actually protecting it. This card is so good that you are aiming to protect this card on the field, and most every deck can get away with that, especially after going first. You set up your board, you flip IO, oh whoops, you can't activate spell cards, so now you gotta deal with my board with only monsters and traps, or you gotta take out IO first, so you gotta trade 1, 2, maybe 3 cards for my 1 IO. And what's egregious about keeping this card in the game in particular is the fact that most good or feasible spell and trap removal for most decks comes in the form of spell cards. So while you'd love to get rid of Imperial Order, sometimes you just can't, which is really uninteractive, it's really unfun, and creates for a lot of unhealthy interactions, especially when the life point cost is like 700, which is so low. But moving on, let's talk about another card that's particularly unfun, and that's Vertanaconda. When this card came out, people were like, whoa, that's actually kind of crazy. You can do a lot of cool things with this. And with the engine requirements of things like the Fusion Destiny engine or even the Red Eyes Dragoon package, the balance of Anaconda and the downsides and drawbacks of playing these engines aren't really that big. Especially nowadays with Destroy Phoenix Enforcer being in the meta, it once again creates a lot of uninteresting and uninteractive play, particularly because Destroy Phoenix Enforcer is so hard to out with almost every single deck. Now, people will still probably play Destroy Phoenix Enforcer even if Predaplant Vertanaconda gets banned, but people have been arguing for Predaplant Vertanaconda to get banned for a couple formats now, and it's really high time it was gonna go. If it wasn't gonna go before Fusion Destiny, it really needs to go now. Look, I'm gonna miss Neos Fusion Turbo as much as the next, but I won't be sad about losing to Destroy Phoenix Enforcer off of 2 monsters after I've negated everything, and they're like, okay, well, that's cool, I'm just gonna go boop, 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 here's a hard boss monster to out for you. The problem with Vertanaconda is not that you can't interact with the cards, something like IO or upcoming cards that we're gonna talk about, but it's the fact that it creates such unhealthy interactions and creates a weird imbalance inside of the game. So for that, I gotta say, peace. Next on the chopping block is Scythe and Artifact Dagda. Essentially right now, the Artifact engine and the DPE engine have been finding its way inside of certain combo decks. You'd make Destroy Phoenix Enforcer, you'd set the Scythe, you'd pop the Scythe, you'd activate the Scythe, and now your opponent is locked out of their extra deck. And so some people are saying that Dagda needs to go, some people saying that Scythe needs to go. And while on a strict game balance standpoint, just straight up, what needs to happen is that Scythe needs to go. I feel like more objectively, Konami might look at Dagda to ban. So yes, Artifact Sanctuary and the Trap Trick engine play hand in hand together in turboing out Scythe. But here's the problem. There is a difference between a generic monster that can effectively set this lockout immediately and an engine that requires 1, 2, 3, at least minimum 4 cards, if not 7 cards to, this is 8, 7 cards to get started. The 3 Trap Trick and 3 Artifact Sanctuary plus the 1 Scythe for maximum consistency. And we saw that being played in TOS format a while back too. It was something that was experimented with. But the reason why I say I think Konami might swing for banning Dagda, because while yes, they tend to hate cards that provide uninteractive play for the players, they also don't mind having that if the cost of playing it or the consistency of playing it affects the deck. There's a lot of cards out there that are really strong, but they require such big setup. I mean, most cards that say unaffected by opponent's cards take quite a bit to get to. But should those be out of the game? I mean, Konami clearly doesn't think so. And I think that's because there's a balance. Those cards come at a cost. And how easy it is to get to that win condition does determine the balance and what would get hit. So for my money, I think that Scythe is bad, and I was gonna say that it's fine, but it's not fine. It's still a bad card. But if they had to take one of the two, I think Dagda is the way to go. Now, out of those cards in particular, there's 2 more that offer a very, very similar interaction that I personally think needs to go, but a lot of people think they're just totally fine. This one is a separate category all on its own, because those other ones I think a lot of people are in agreement of being like, yeah, these cards probably are good. But for some reason, there are fans of these upcoming cards. Arch Nemesis Protoss is a more recent addition to the ban list talk, while Winda has been in talks for a long time. It should have been gone. And while Protoss is arguably worse, it is in theory easier to out than something like Winda. I'm not saying Protoss needs to stay, Protoss needs to go. But Winda is so bad. There's no reason for this card to exist in the game, especially because you typically cannot out it with one summon, one special summon. But on top of that, it's really unfun when paired with something like the Invoked engine, which can protect it from stuff like battle. In addition, it recycles material from the graveyard, as most of the Shaddoll cards do. And it's really easy to make, especially in some of the most prominent meta decks at the moment. Because you can run it with something like App Cologne, which puts it in the graveyard, gets you the Schism, and then Schism activates with no requirement of almost main deck Shaddoll monsters, and the fact that you can play multiple Winda is also an issue. The big issue is that even if, let's say, someone has a board, and you end up breaking the board with something like an evenly matched, let's say, and they only keep the Winda, that can be enough sometimes. There's not a lot of cards that really interact or deal with that. Sure, Infinite Impermanence or Forbidden Chalice can be one of them, but if you don't draw something like Infinite Impermanence, Chalice, or Droplets, you are probably just losing. And that same argument can be floated onto Protoss as well. The fact that Winda has been in the game for so long, though, is much more egregious in my opinion. But outside of just the ban cards, in terms of general balance with the game, there are other things that we probably should talk about. Things like Eldlik and Sky Striker and Tri-Brigade and Lyrilusk. I left Tri-Brigade and Lyrilusk out of things that are like, obviously this card needs to go, because I don't quite understand what to hit in those decks. They're so consistent unless you just completely rip or gut the engine somehow. I personally don't see a really good way of balancing those decks. That's something that's gonna have to come in a future date. Maybe more testing is required. Those decks just have so much gas that there's just like yeah, you'd have to just rip it all out. But for something like Striker or Eldlick, those things are concerning to me. Eldlick a little more so than Striker. I think Eldlick, something like Scarlet Sanguine, has needed to be limited for some time, or maybe hurting the consistency of the deck a little bit. I think people are playing it more as an engine now than anything else, which is good. It's a better step going forward for the game, but ultimately speaking, something needs to be done about those decks as well, because otherwise they're going to be the best decks upcoming in the format. Sword Soul and Floowandereeze probably need to be addressed as well, but it's probably not going to happen. I know people want Dimension Shifter banned, which yeah, yes and no. So overall, I think that the ban list coming out probably needs some fine tuning. I don't necessarily think that Konami is going to be addressing all the problematic cards this format, but I do really hope that they hit at least 3 or 4, because that would be awesome. This format's overall pretty okay. It's pretty good, but those problematic cards are really a big issue. Anyways, that's all my thoughts and opinions on the upcoming Yu-Gi-Oh! Ban list. What do you guys think of it? What do you guys think that could come off the list, or what should be banned or should not be banned? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you guys like this video, make sure to leave it a like. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I got a lot more videos coming in the pipeline, so stay tuned for that if you would like to. But yeah, that's all I gotta say. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.